Keanu Reeves strolled through the gates of Westlake Police Training Camp, appearing like any other overlooked individual, dressed in a gray shirt with sunburned shoulders and weary eyes. The recruits failed to recognize him. They dismissed him as a joke. An old man with no business trying to be a cop. They shoved him aside, laughed behind his back, and one officer even spat in his face. But what none of them knew, not the instructors, not the cadets, not even the commanding officer, was that Keanu was there on a mission, not for role, not for fame. He was there to uncover something rotten, and when the truth emerged, it shattered their world. Before you hear what Keanu said that silenced an entire police force, consider this. If you witness someone spit on a stranger, would you speak up or remain silent? Comment "speak up" or stay silent below. The bus rumbled to a stop at the gates of the Westlake Federal Police Training Facility. Heat waves shimmering over the sun-baked pavement. Dust swirled as boots hit the gravel. Young recruits, eager and loud, stepped off, joking and shoving, already forming pecking orders. One man didn't fit the picture, wearing a plain gray t-shirt, black track pants, and scuffed running shoes. He moved slowly, older and quiet. His shoulder-length hair was loosely tied back, flecks of gray visible in his beard. He wore no sunglasses, no bravado, just a duffel bag and a distant gaze. To them he was nobody, but this wasn't a movie set. Not today. "Move it, Grandpa," one recruit muttered as he shoved past. The man didn't respond. He simply took in the towering structures, the shooting ranges, the obstacle fields, the endless stretch of discipline and exhaustion awaiting them. For Keanu Reeves, this wasn't for show. It was research, an agreement forged behind closed doors with the Department of Justice, allowing him to blend in as John K. for 3 weeks of real training, unrecognized, undocumented, and unscripted. He was there to listen, to watch, to feel what the uniform meant before he portrayed one on screen. The check-in officer barely glanced at him. Name: John K. The man scanned his clipboard, grunted and gestured. "Barracks B, you'll be with Alpha Team. Orientation starts at 5 o'clock. "Thanks," Keanu replied, soft and clipped. Inside the dorm, recruits were already forming alliances. Some eyed him with suspicion. Others dismissed him entirely. He offered no handshake, no explanation, just silence. Later in the mess hall, whispers began. "Guy's too old. Maybe a charity case. He's probably here on some diversity program." Keanu sat alone, eating quietly. But across the room, Officer Braddock watched him. A towering man with arms like bricks and eyes like gunmetal. He didn't like questions. And the new guy was a question mark. One that didn't belong. By nightfall, the murmurs had turned to mockery. But Keanu didn't flinch. He wasn't there to be liked. He wasn't even there to be understood. He was there to see the truth before it revealed them all. The sun rose hard and fast at Westlake, baking the compound by 6 a.m. The recruits lined up outside the mess hall, sweat already forming under their uniforms. Keanu stood in the line's shadow, hands behind his back, posture relaxed but out of place. To the others, he was the misfit, the loner, the guy who didn't talk, didn't joke, didn't belong. "Hey, old man," one of the younger recruits called loud enough for half the line to hear. "You lose your way from yoga class." Chuckles rippled through the group. Keanu didn't answer. He simply shifted his weight and stared ahead, unfazed. Inside the cafeteria, the taunts escalated. He sat at an empty table. One recruit deliberately spilled juice near him and smirked. "Oops, guess the arthritis kicked in." Another leaned in, whispering just loud enough. "What kind of pull you got to even be here? Your uncle is a senator." They weren't just joking. They were probing, testing, and Keanu let them in. In the obstacle course later that day, the group was paired up for buddy exercises. When Keanu's name was called, John K., no one volunteered. Silence. Officer Braddock stepped forward. Figures. No one wants to partner with a weak link. He turned to Keanu with a twisted grin. "Hollywood sent us a grandpa. What are you, 50? You going to break a hip climbing that wall. Still Keanu said nothing. He walked to the start of the course, set his jaw, and waited for the signal. But Broddock wasn't done. As Keanu began the climb, Broddock barked, "Faster, Grandpa. The criminals won't wait for you to catch your breath on set." Snickers, snorts. A slow chant began. "John K., John K." When Keanu dropped to the ground after the wall, rolling to his feet, Broddock walked up too close. "You got no business here," he spat. "We're training warriors, not actors." The spit heard around the barracks. And then, without warning, Broddock spat in Keanu's face. Time froze. A long, wet strand of contempt clung to Keanu's cheekbone. Silence. Then a burst of laughter from a few in the back. One recruit even clapped. Keanu didn't flinch. He slowly pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and wiped his face, methodical and calm. His eyes, however, darkened. They met Broddock's, flat, unreadable, unwavering. "Are you finished?" he asked quietly. Broddock blinked, surprised. "I said, are you finished?" Keanu repeated. Broddock scoffed, backed off. "Get back in line." Keanu did. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't report it. Not yet, because this was exactly what he came to see. And Broddock had just shown his entire hand. The next morning began with drills, harsh commands, dust clouds, rubber bullets, and bruised egos. But something in the air had shifted. Whispers followed Keanu as he passed. Some recruits now avoided eye contact. Others doubled down on snide comments, unwilling to admit what they'd seen the day before. Broddock acted as if nothing had happened. He barked louder, moved meaner, and made sure John K. got double the punishment for minor infractions. But Keanu remained calm, detached, watching. At 4 p.m., an announcement came through the PA system. "All cadets and staff report to the assembly hall immediately. Mandatory guest lecture in 15 minutes." Grumbling echoed across the barracks. Guest lectures usually meant hours of policy lectures from aging bureaucrats or PR advisors. Most expected boredom. What they didn't expect was him. Keanu stood behind the stage curtain as the room filled with recruits in uniform, chatter bouncing off concrete walls. No one recognized him yet, not with his hair pulled back, suit pressed, and presence composed like stone. Captain Reyes, the base director, stepped up to the microphone. "Before we begin," he said, "I'd like to remind everyone of our mission here: integrity, discipline, and public trust. Today, we're honored to be joined by someone who has experienced all three in a way few of us ever will." There was a pause, and for the past 3 days, Reyes continued. "He's been one of you." Confused murmurs broke out. From the side door, Keanu walked in. Silence swallowed the room. Eyes widened, mouths parted. One cadet dropped his pen. Another muttered, "No way." Officer Broddock, standing near the wall with arms crossed, froze mid-breath. Keanu stepped onto the stage. His voice calm, steady, amplified. "My name is Keanu Reeves, and yes, I've been training here with you. Observing, listening, learning. No one dared move. You didn't know who I was. That was the point. I asked the Department of Justice for permission to experience this camp as an unknown, to understand how it feels to walk in without power, without favor, without a name." He scanned the faces. Some stared in shock. Others looked down in shame. "What I saw here wasn't just tough love or discipline. I saw abuse, saw fear. I saw cruelty masked as command." Broddock's face had turned the color of old cement. "I was spit on in front of all of you, humiliated, and most of you laughed or looked away." Keanu's voice didn't rise, but it cut deeper because it didn't have to. "Imagine if I hadn't been me. Imagine if I were just another civilian, another recruit, another kid without a voice." A long silence, one that stretched like punishment. Then he delivered the final blow. "That ends now." The silence after Keanu's final words was thick, paralyzing. The recruits shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The sound of the central air kicking overhead felt louder than it should. And then Keanu stepped forward, his gaze hardening. What happened to me yesterday wasn't just a lapse in judgment. It wasn't a joke. It was a demonstration of power unchecked. He paused, letting that sink in. Officer Braddock. Every head turned. Braddock stiffened, his arms still crossed, but his knuckles now pale. Keanu locked eyes with him. You spat in my face. You mocked me publicly. You encouraged others to do the same. Not because I posed a threat, but because you thought I didn't matter. Braddock's mouth twitched. I didn't know who you were, he said, voice low and dry. That's exactly the problem, Keanu said coldly. You didn't know and you didn't care. A murmur rippled through the room. You treated me the way you likely treat civilians you don't respect. You assumed I had no power. And that assumption is why people fear officers like you. Braddock took a half step forward. This is... Captain Reyes cut him off. Stand down, Braddock. Braddock froze. Keanu turned toward the rest of the recruits. This isn't about me. It's about the culture you're building here. If this is how you treat someone you see as weak, what happens when you meet someone struggling on the street when the cameras aren't rolling? He exhaled slowly, letting the tension dissipate but not the truth. You laughed while someone degraded. That's the part that haunts me most. Captain Reyes stepped forward, face grim. Effective immediately. Officer Braddock is suspended pending a full internal investigation. Gasps erupted. Keanu didn't flinch. He simply stepped back and let the institution take over. Braddock's jaw locked. He turned sharply and stormed toward the exit, but not before passing Keanu. Their shoulders nearly touched. Keanu didn't look away, and Braddock couldn't hold his gaze. The doors slammed behind him. Reyes faced the cadets. Let this serve as your first real lesson in leadership. Rank is not immunity. Respect must be earned and maintained. Keanu nodded once, then looked around the room. You all have a choice. To be the kind of officers who serve or the kind who dominate. No one spoke, but something had cracked. For the first time in days, Keanu saw real reflection on their faces. Not fear, not defiance, just the beginning of accountability. And it was long overdue. Braddock was gone, but his shadow still lingered in the barracks, in the locker room, in the silences and glances exchanged during drills. The man who once strutted through the facility, barking orders, had been suspended in front of everyone, and it shook them. For 3 days, the compound ran tight. No jokes, no whispered insults. The training officers spoke in clipped commands, visibly nervous. The cadets moved with extra stiffness, not out of fear of punishment, but of exposure. Because the investigation had begun, a federal review team arrived the next morning. 2 agents in dark suits, no smiles. They went room to room, locker to locker, asking questions no one wanted to answer. Least not at first, but the silence cracked. The first to step forward was Cadet Lynn, a quiet recruit who had once laughed with the others. Now she sat across from the review panel and admitted, Braddock humiliated a female trainee last year. She filed a complaint and then dropped out, said she couldn't take the retaliation. Her voice trembled, but she said it anyway. Then came Cadet Morales, who recalled being forced to do triple drills for questioning a training method. By the end of the week, 7 separate accounts surfaced. Stories of verbal abuse, racial slurs, excessive punishment. Nothing illegal on paper, but everything was unethical in spirit. And then the records came. Keanu sat in the briefing room, arms folded. As Captain Reyes laid the documents before the panel, 4 previous complaints against Braddock, all labeled unsubstantiated, all closed without further review. Keanu glanced down. A photo of a bruised cadet stared back at him from an old file. He shook his head slowly. How many people saw and stayed quiet? He asked aloud. No one answered, but across the room, a cadet raised his hand. I did. Keanu turned. The cadet cleared his throat. I saw him cross the line more than once, but I kept my head down. I thought that's how this place worked. Keanu's voice was low but firm. Then it's time we stop pretending it should. The storm had passed, but the air still crackled. Braddock's suspension and the flood of buried complaints left the training facility raw, exposed. What had once been hidden under tradition and fear was now written in ink, underlined by silence that had gone on far too long. And in the center of it all stood Keanu, not as a movie star anymore, but as a witness. He didn't leave after the reveal. He stayed, walked the same hallways, ate at the same tables, did every drill with the cadets. Only now the laughter was gone, so was the mockery. Respect hadn't replaced it yet, but awareness had. One morning during sparring exercises, Cadet Morales approached him. Helmet under one arm, voice tentative. "I just wanted to say sorry for before. I laughed because everyone else did. I thought you were just no one." Keanu looked at him, not with judgment, but with that quiet, piercing steadiness he was known for. And now Morales hesitated. "Then now I think you were the only one paying attention." Keanu nodded once. "Then start paying attention too. That's how it changes." Captain Reyes called a full assembly 2 days later. The tone was different, tighter, sharper. "This camp will not go back to business as usual," he said. "A new oversight policy goes into effect today. Anonymous reporting, third-party review, and a mandatory class on civilian de-escalation led by our guest, Mr. Reeves." The cadets stirred. Keanu stood from the back, walked to the front, and faced them, not as a lecturer, but as a man who had endured what the worst of them allowed. "Some of you asked why I didn't fight back when I was mocked, when I was spit on." He paused, scanning their faces. "Because that's exactly what so many people outside this fence go through every day. And they don't get to fight back either. And silence. You want to wear a badge. Then earn it by knowing when to lead and when to listen." From that day forward, the drills stayed the same. The sweat, the bruises, the 5 a.m. wake-ups. But the tone shifted. Cadets who once sneered now opened doors for one another. Cadet Lynn volunteered to lead mental health peer support. Morales apologized to 3 younger recruits he'd brushed off before. And at the end of the week, someone taped a single sentence to the bulletin board. "If silence protected us, we wouldn't be here." Keanu saw it, said nothing. But that night, he stayed a little longer in the rec room, talking, listening, letting the uniformed strangers around him become people. The change was slow, but it was real. 2 weeks after the training reforms began, Keanu received a quiet invitation. It wasn't from a government official, a reporter, or even Captain Reyes. It was from a local community center director, a woman named Mrs. Carter, who ran youth outreach programs for families affected by police violence. She had heard about the events at Westlake, not from the news, but from one of her teenage volunteers whose cousin was a cadet in the camp. "They said you stayed," she told Keanu over the phone. "They said you didn't walk away. That means something here." She invited him to speak at their Youth and Justice Open Forum. He didn't hesitate. The next afternoon, Keanu arrived at a small brick building in the middle of a quiet neighborhood. The chairs were plastic. The walls were covered in handmade posters. The microphone didn't work, but the room was full. Fathers with folded arms, mothers with eyes sharp from worry, teenagers with guarded stares, and one little boy in a yellow hoodie sitting alone in the front row. Keanu didn't stand behind a podium. He sat on the edge of the stage, legs relaxed, voice gentle. "I came to your town as a stranger," he began. "I left behind cameras and scripts. I wanted to learn what it felt like to stand in someone else's shoes, not with lights on me, but with judgment." He told them about the camp, about the laughter, the spit, the silence. And I realized this wasn't just training. It was a mirror of something deeper, something broken. In the back row, someone exhaled sharply. In the front, the little boy raised his hand. Keanu nodded at him. "Are you really the man from the movies?" The boy asked, wide-eyed. Keanu smiled faintly. "I am, but here I'm just a student like all of you." The boy nodded, then whispered, "My mom says the police don't protect people like us." The room held its breath. Keanu leaned forward, looked the boy in the eye. "Sometimes she's right, and that's not okay. But that's why we have to change it together." Then Keanu offered his hand. "And if you ever feel like no one's listening, you come find me. Deal?" The boy stepped forward, shyly shook his hand. The room clapped, soft at first, then louder. Not for a star, but for someone who showed up, stayed quiet, and spoke when it mattered. Side dusk fell. Keanu stood beside Mrs. Carter, watching the crowd spill onto the sidewalk.